Question night for Snatch Online, and the question we're going to be thinking about is, why does God allow suffering? This is a question that many people ask when they look at our world, because our world is full of suffering. It seems like everywhere we look there is pain in every direction. See the destruction caused by natural disasters such as volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes and hurricanes. When we look back in recent history, we remember the events that have taken place around the world that have caused so much destruction to thousands and millions of people's lives, like World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, the events of 9/11, along with many other tragedies. Over 30 years, Catholics and Protestants killed each other during the Troubles, bringing unshakable pain to thousands throughout this country. It's a war that still affects and divides communities and people today. See, we are reminded of the world's brokenness when we see ads of children around the world dying from poverty and starvation. We've been challenged recently as we've seen the treatment of certain minorities and people throughout history, the injustice, abuse and torture that they've had to endure and suffer because of gender and race. We see the pain and suffering of friends and family members suffering from anxiety and depression, losing loved ones to suicide. We remember people who suffer from long-term illnesses like Alzheimer's and terminal cancer, which are untreatable. See, as we see all of these things occur right before our own eyes, we might say to God, why do you allow this to happen? Why don't you put a stop to the pain, sadness and tears? To answer this question, we start at the very beginning in Genesis. This is the beginning of the world and we know how it works. Look how God describes his creation in verse 4. It says, God saw that the light was good and he separated the light from the darkness. Look now at verse 10. It says, and God saw that it was good. Verse 12, and God saw that it was good. Verse 18, and God said it was good. Verse 25, and God said that it was good. Verse 31, God saw all that he had made and it was very good. So in Genesis chapter 1 we see a God creating the world, and everything that he created was good. Everything was perfect. There was no tears, no sickness, no lies, no natural disasters, no murder and no death. In the first 2 chapters of Genesis we read about a world that was without pain and suffering. It was perfect. When we compare our world to the world of the Garden of Eden, we realize that it is completely different to the world that God had originally created. So what changed? What happened? How did we go from a world that was perfect to a world that is broken? Genesis chapter 3, things progress. Adam and Eve are created. Adam has been put in charge to look after God's creation. He's been told by God not to eat from the tree of knowledge. We know that the devil appears and makes false promises to Eve, and they believe Satan and disobey God by eating the forbidden fruit. And there's a consequence. Look at verses 16 to 19 of chapter 3. It says, to the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe, with painful labour. You will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. To Adam he said, because you have listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you will return. In one chapter, the entire world changed. Pains in childbearing increased, work became hard and tiresome, and death entered the world. Look at verse 19 again. It says, by the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Because of Adam, sin came into the world like poison, and God's perfect creation was no longer perfect. Instead, it was tainted. From Genesis chapter 3, we see the effects of sin coming into the world. Because in the very next chapter, the Bible records the first murder when Cain kills his brother Abel. So the answer to the question, why does bad things happen? Well, the simple answer is because of sin. We live in a world that is fallen, broken, and sinful. This is why life can be so hard. And because we live in this sinful world, we experience hardship, pain, misery, suffering, and death. Sometimes we think that if God is all powerful, all loving, all knowing, well then why does he allow people to suffer? Why did God not stop Hitler and the Nazis killing 6 million Jews? Why did he allow people to hurt others physically and emotionally? Why will he not cure me from my illness? See, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve wanted to be their own rulers. And when they ate the forbidden fruit, not only did it affect their lives, but also the lives of everyone in history. Look at Romans chapter 5 verse 21. Paul writes, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. You see, because of Adam, all of us are born sinners. God didn't create us like mindless robots. Rather, he gives us free will to allow us to make our own choices. Free will is God's way in saying to us, you can live your life whatever way you want. You can do anything you want to do. You can do whatever is right in your own eyes. Unfortunately, this free will has been abused. And yet we blame God for things like poverty and starvation, even though statistics show that there is enough food in this world to feed everyone in abundance. We blame God for war when it's sinful humans who have started war, not God. Humanity creates a mess and a tragedy and then asks God why he let it happen. You see, we all make bad decisions because we're all born sinners. And because we are sinners, we want free will so we can reject God's rule. God doesn't create evil. He doesn't delight in it because he himself is sinless. But there's someone who does create evil, and that's Satan. You see, when we think of Satan, we think of this fictional character, a man with a pitchfork and red horns. However, we must believe that Satan actually exists because the Bible tells us that he does. Look at John chapter 10 verse 10. We're told, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. John says that Satan, not God, seeks to steal, kill and destroy. Satan wants you to suffer. He wants your life to be filled with misery and pain so that you will blame and hate God for what you're going through. You might be here tonight and you're going through a really difficult experience, one that seems so hard to bear. And sometimes the last person you go to is God because you're so angry at him, you blame him for experiencing or feeling this pain or those thoughts. It seems like God is allowing you to suffer, that he doesn't really care. You see, God is not the author of pain, and he isn't the author of suffering. No, sin is. However, God can use our pain, he can use our suffering in order to make us more dependent on him and to make us more like Jesus. That is how much he loves us. When we are experiencing pain, we can never see or understand what God is doing. It's only after that we see how God has used those situations to bring us closer to him. You see, we must never think that God is a God in heaven who is indifferent to suffering, that he doesn't understand how difficult life can be, because he himself suffered. Throughout Christ's life on earth, we realize that Jesus suffered. Isaiah chapter 53 writes, "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed." Jesus lived a life of suffering. He was a man of sorrow who experienced many setbacks. He knows the heartbreak of losing people close to us. He was betrayed and deserted by those he called friends. He was rejected, beaten and whipped before his death. The God that we serve understands our pain and grief. He suffered the most gruesome death on a bloody cross so that we could have life with him without pain or suffering. Turn now to Revelation chapter 21 verses 1 to 5. "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old odor of things has passed away.' He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' Then he said, 'Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.'" Someday God will restore the creation that he made, owns and loves. It will be perfect again, because God's kingdom will consist of real people, his people living in a real place, and there will be no evil, no misery, no suffering, no death, no tears and no sin, and we will be with the Lord forever. Romans chapter 5 verse 2. "Through him we have also obtained access by faith into his grace, in which we stand and we rejoice in hope of the glory of God." As Christians, we will suffer in this world, but we must focus and remember what's coming in the future. Paul says that despite the pain that we go through, the heartache, the unimaginable suffering, as Christians we can rejoice in the hope that our future is secured for us because of Jesus. Through his life, death and resurrection, he has saved us from our sin, meaning that we will be with him in his perfect kingdom forever.
Lord, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. And without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. my